trailblazing. 100 years of striving, from extreme poverty to a well-off society, from a sleeping giant to a responsible global power. Mission and vision, from the past and into the future. Decoding the Communist Party of China. Centenary and Beyond, only on CGTN.
You're watching Global Watch on CGTN. Now we continue our special series, Centenary and Beyond, to mark 100 years since the founding of the Communist Party of China. We look back over the party's history and mission with our reporters, bringing you stories from the past and present. We also get insights from experts on what drives the party in fulfilling its present mission. Today, we look at how the party has developed throughout the years by continuously seeking the liberation of people's mind and embracing innovation while facing difficulties. For more on that, we go live to our reporters Yang Chengxi in Fengyang County in East China's Anhui Province and He Weiwei in South China's Shenzhen city in Guangdong Province. And Yang Chengxi is right now at Xiaogang Village, which was a model for rural reforms in the country back in 1978. And He Weiwei is in Huaqiangbei to look at how innovation drove the area to become China's first hub for selling electronics. And let me start with you, Chengxi. Tell us about where you are.
Hi, Pandang. I'm in Xiaogang, a village in eastern China's Anhui province with a remarkable story. And it all starts right here in this old farmhouse behind me, built in the 1970s. Now, to better understand this story, here's a little bit of background. Since the early years of the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, aggressive land reform by way of collective farming had dampened farmers' work incentives since they couldn't keep most of their harvest. What followed was a decrease of farming output, which was definitely the case for this village, having been one of the poorest in the country at the time. Now, in what seemed like a final blow, a huge drought hit Xiaogang village in the 1978. It was so severe that some people in the village had to go out and beg for a living. And in that desperate time, something remarkable happened. Come on in and I'll show you. Now, on November 24th, 1978, 18 local farmers gathered here in this old farmhouse to make an agreement that changed their lives and also the development policies of China. So in this mudroom, they secretly agreed among themselves to reallocate the land back to each family. Apart from paying taxes and other farming duties, they get to keep the rest of their harvest. Now know that they're taking a huge risk by going against one of the most fundamental national policies at the time. Now here's a replica of the pact that they signed with their fingerprints on it. Imagine the huge courage that they had to have when you can see that a part of it reads like this. If we fail and some of us gets put to death, the rest of us will raise their children until they're 18 years old. Some of the Chinese characters here are miswritten, and you could see that there were farmers who led very simple lives, but with a sheer desire to change their fate and revive their village. Now, the farmers' secret agreement worked. In the subsequent year, farming output locally rose substantially. I'm now with Yan Mei, the granddaughter of two of the farmers who signed the pact. Thank you very much for joining our program. Now, your grandpas from both your mother's and father's side were in that very room and pushed their fingerprints on that piece of paper. When they talked about that part of their lives, how have they remembered it?
They knew it was very dangerous, but everyone agreed that it was on the way. In the end, they changed their lives. We were poor, but now we can build roads and houses. They are happy that they did it.
They're happy that it did it. How have their courage and spirit influenced your work in everyday life?
It is a big inspiration. We should always find new ways to make life better, and shouldn't just say bye. We will forever cherish this spirit every day.
Thank you very much. That was Yan Mei, the granddaughter of two of the farmers that made the pact. Now follow me into the courtyard here. Now look at these old farming tools. You could tell that life was hard for these local villagers, but it was all worth it. In just 1 year, local farming output in 1979 was as much as the previous 5 years combined. Everyone from China wanted to know how they did it. According to locals, hotels at the time were often fully booked from people coming from all over to learn their secrets. So in 1984, the central government officially recognized this policy and then promoted it across the country. I am now with Mr. Einar Tangen, our political and economic affairs commentator. Thank you very much for joining our program. Nice to have you always. It was about the same time when China launched its reform and opening up policies, around 1978 and 1979. And the country has had major reforms in areas like agriculture, in business, and many other areas as well. What does it say about the governance philosophy of the Communist Party of China?
Well, it was able to embrace local innovation. And not only was it successful, but it's become a vehicle. It really explains just how successful China has been. This ability to take what the people have learned and then transform it into a new vision.
Thank you. Now, in your opinion, how do you think the CPC views the role of the rural areas and the farming industry, as well as the peasantry, in the development path of the Chinese nation?
Well, the support for the transformation of China started in the cities, but it was really supported by the rural areas, farmers who had previously literally been little more than indentured serfs. So this was very important. What you see here is a testament to people working for themselves. And by studying this history, people are able to see not only how China is today, but also a path forward as it goes into the future.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Einar Tangen, our political and economic affairs commentator. Now, the 18 villagers of Xiaogang probably never would have thought that in that cold evening of 1978, they've made a collective decision that likely shifted the course of the entire country. As we talked about, it was a time of reform and opening up. And 2 years after that, in the year 1980, China has seen its first private business vendor.
Wenzhou is famous for many things: its shoes, leather products, the difficulty of its dialect, and also its vibrant business vibe and bold spirit. For centuries, the city's merchants have been keen and venturous in seeking commercial opportunities at home and abroad. There's even a popular saying that refers to Wenzhou people as the Jews of the Orient. However, there was a time when marketing and private business were banned in this country, thought to be what authorities called speculative activities. But it all changed after the country adopted what are called reform and opening up policies in the late 70s. Zhang Huamei, the owner of this button shop, deserves a special mention here. In 1980, she received the country's first license to be a private business vendor, and from that moment, she no longer needed to worry about getting detained. From a small vendor to a business empire, Zhang's success inspired many, with thousands of people just like her chasing their dreams that year. There were ups and downs in Zhang's career over the years, but like many business-savvy Wenzhou merchants, she always pulled through with hard work and persistence. Zhang and her fellow merchants are witnesses to the rapid growth of China's private enterprises and the changes that transform their hometown. 42 years later, many of them have become the backbone of China's economy, and now there's a new generation of young entrepreneurs following in their footsteps, ready to take China into a brand new era.
When we're talking about innovation in China, how can we miss out the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen? And for more on that, let's cross live to our reporter He Weiwei, standing by right there. Weiwei, I believe you're at Huaqiangbei. Now, I believe that's a familiar name for anyone who has even a little bit experience with e-commerce, right?
Right, you're right, Pandong. I'm at the Huaqiangbei Museum in the city of Shenzhen. So what is Huaqiangbei? Why are we here today? As you just mentioned, Shenzhen city is well known as China's innovation hub, and Huaqiangbei area is exactly the place where you can decode the innovative gene of the Shenzhen city, because Huaqiangbei is China's largest and earliest electronics market. And even today, it remains to be a paradise for Chinese technology enthusiasts. So it's a market, what can you buy here? The answer is anything, any electronic gadget you can imagine. And this cabinet displays some of the products that were sold here. For example, now we're seeing a very old model of mobile phone, and as well we can see a voice recorders. You know, all these products reminds us of the evolution of the electronics industry. And actually, but what I really want to show you is this. These counters, 1 meter counters. And these counters, they are a defining feature of Huaqiangbei. They are a business model here. You know, in Huaqiangbei, there are tens of thousands of vendors like this, booths like this, the vendors with seats like this, and they sell all kinds of products. Aside from the products that I just showed you, they also sell hardware and components such as circuit boards, batteries, capacitors, even you can find very tiny components here. And there's a saying that in Huaqiangbei, you can find any components needed to assemble a mobile phone all by yourself. Indeed, that's possible. And also, you never know, one of those vendors sitting here may just be a millionaire. That's quite true, actually. It's from the 1 meter counters like this that many businessmen in Huaqiangbei, they make big money, which enable them to expand their business and then later to open their own factories. So Huaqiangbei electronics markets, it was established in 1980s, and it was the first market in China allowed to import and export electronics. So the establishment of the market itself, it's seen as a sample of China's opening up to the world. But actually, Huaqiangbei has more meaning than that. It has pioneered many firsts in China. For example, Huaqiangbei is the home of China's first shopping mall, and it is also the first incubator for entrepreneurs. For example, this is a place where China's internet giant Tencent established its first office. So we can see that Huaqiangbei really reflects the core spirit of Shenzhen. That's the innovation, the pursuit of innovation, and be fearless to try new things and to open up minds always. Actually, that is also the spirit that the Communist Party of China has been committed to. And thanks to that spirit, Shenzhen city had witnessed rapid development, and it has labeled as a demonstration city to implement pilot reforms for the upcoming 5 years in China. And for the year 2020, Shenzhen's GDP grew 3% on a year-on-year basis. That's despite the COVID-19 pandemic that has battered the global economy. And 1/3 of the city's GDP came from emerging industries, including IT, including high-end manufacturing. So for more on how Shenzhen city is playing a leading role in China's development and innovation, let's take a look.
For enterprising individuals, Shenzhen is like a huge magnet. Daniel Huang arrived here 5 years ago, harboring his ambition to start a company of his own. He believes the next generation of power should be faster, cleaner, and safer. Today, his battery exchange business is reshaping Chinese habits.
And the supply chain, the manufacturing capability around Shenzhen is one of the best in the world.
Before Huang came to Shenzhen, he first cooperated with world-famous companies such as Apple and Bose. Huang said starting a business in China can be very different from any Western country. In China, people tend to have more of an emotional attachment to what they work for.
If you run out of cash, you don't pay the salary in the US, when you start a business, it's game over. They're going to leave the next day. But in China, you can find people that are willing to stick with it. Even you tell them that, hey, you know what, we need to have a less salary than normal market rate. I think if they believe in you, you can find a lot of people that are willing to work with you.
But to start a one-of-a-kind company in China from scratch saw many challenges.
Well, I never thought that I am going to give up because I never will. Life is about solving problems, not about making it easy.
Liu Nianqiu, partner of Deeproot, a self-driving car company, shares similar ambitions. He believes the autonomous vehicle industry will open the door to a whole new world.
I was very inspired by a visually impaired customer. After trying one of our self-driving cars, he was so excited and said he finally knew how it feels to adapt to a smart car and to enjoy yourself and the vehicle on the road.
Many critics say the industry may be too dependent on government policies to thrive. But Liu says this is not true. He says in Shenzhen, companies and the government are pretty much working together to blaze a path for this industry of tomorrow.
Shenzhen city government is a government that really does practical things. The so-called Shenzhen speed is not only seen in business and construction, but also in the efficiency of local government.
Lu Sirui, CGTN, Shenzhen.
For more insight, we're joined in the studio by Professor Xing Sun from Beijing Normal University. So, Professor, would you agree that the very idea of innovation is kind of evolving, going along with China's development? Tell us more about the historical and even current principles or philosophies of Communist Party of China's governance regarding this particular idea.
Right. I think what struck me the most with both the Xiaogang village case and the Huaqiangbei case are two things. And number one is the importance of changing or freeing people's mindset. Nowadays when we look back at the Xiaogang village case, people might take it for granted. What's the big deal? A bunch of guys taking on private farming, what's so special? But one really has to understand this case against the historical context where in the previous decades, China was so dominated by ideological struggles. So bureaucrats from top to the bottom were all strangled with ideological benchmarks. All the decisions they made, they have to consider the ideological orientations and all that. And farmland were collectivized under the People's Commune system, and private economy was denounced for decades. So it was against this background then the reform and opening up era initiated. So that was a very huge change. I think the most important thing is to change people's mindset. That is to seek truth from facts instead of from ideologies. Well, in fact, seeking truth from facts is not an invention of the 1980s. It goes all the way back to the early years of the Communist Party of China when Mao and his colleagues, on the one hand, adopted the orthodox Marxism, but on the other hand, adapted to the Chinese reality because they believed urban-led revolution would never succeed because China was primarily an agrarian society dominated by a very large peasantry. So they, experimented the land reform and gave back land to the landless peasants and also gave them the hope. So in the 80s, Deng kind of drew from the early experience of the CPC by adopting seeking truth from facts, which actually initiated decades of burgeoning of economic growth in China. And the second thing that struck me the most is the importance of the social power. And if you look at the Huaqiangbei case, it really demonstrates that Chinese private enterprise is a very innovative, with very strong potential. When given a chance, they will demonstrate their vitality and their growth points. So it is very important policy-wise for the Chinese government to further refine the regulatory system so that on the one hand, it provides the opportunity for enterprises to develop further. On the other hand, it also contains the abusive power of the market.
Thank you very much, Professor Xing Sun from Beijing Normal University. And continue our coverage. Over the past century, the Communist Party of China has led the country onto the lane of fast development, transforming all aspects of life in the country. And to mark the CPC's centenary, CGTN sits down with citizens to hear how life has changed from one generation to the next.
One big difference is the older generation's confusion about digitalization and modernization. Secondly, they think raising chickens has nothing to do with investment and that large amounts of investment are too risky. But I believe high risk brings high profit. Thirdly, they think raising chickens is not a classy job. But digitalization and high-tech measures give me faith in building up a successful career. I'll not give up.
I used to herd cows for a couple of years since I was 9 years old. There were no cement roads, only muddy dirt tracks. But now my grandson goes to kindergarten. We've been thinking about his education and decided to send him to the school in town and buy an apartment there. There's no rush. Take it easy.
Young people pay more attention to convenient transportation and quality public facilities. Now the government is more considering how to support facilities by building schools, hospitals and subways around newly built neighborhoods. Young people focus more on these issues. The elderly are more traditional in Shanghai. For instance, they prefer to live close to downtown areas. They think differently.
Tomorrow in this special series, we'll look at the Communist Party of China's work on green development. We'll visit a village in central China to see how it benefits from planting, and we'll have stories on how people boost economy with green energy. Do stay tuned for that. Now it's time for China by Numbers, which looks at the nation's development over the past 100 years. China is now world leader in science and technology. Some of the most innovative companies are headquartered in China, and this is largely due to the country's focus on research, development and innovation. Take a look.
When the Western world was modernizing and reaching technological breakthroughs during the first two industrial revolutions, China, amid domestic social chaos and warfare, missed the opportunity to get ahead. When the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, the country only had around 50,000 technological personnel, and only 1/10 of them specialized in scientific research. Many Western countries had already gained much experience in advanced areas such as nuclear weapons and space exploration. But China began to catch up fast. In 1964, the country successfully detonated its first atomic bomb, making China the fifth nuclear-armed nation. And in 1970, China launched its first space satellite, Dongfang Hong-1, 13 years after the Soviet Union's Sputnik 1. Its space exploration has been fast expanding on multiple areas. In 2003, China became the third nation to send an astronaut into space after Russia and the US. In 2019, its Chang'e 4 mission made the world's first ever soft landing on the far side of the moon, a milestone in humanity's lunar exploration. And its homegrown Mars probe Tianwen-1 is aiming to have an all-round study of the red planet's geographics after being launched in July 2020. These significant scientific breakthroughs were due to the hard work of scientists and a great deal of investment. Since 2013, China has been the world's second largest investor in research and development spending after the US. In 2020, the nation's R&D expenditure accounted for 2.4% of the annual GDP, topping 2.4 trillion yuan, or $370 billion. And it's seen an over 10% yearly increase for the past 5 years. In 2018, the Science Citation Index database compiled 418,000 articles by Chinese researchers. The United Nations says China has also become the nation which produces the most scientific articles. And the World Intellectual Property Organization says since 2019, China has been the top filer for international patents, overtaking the US. It's also leading in the 5G construction. And China has the world's largest 5G network with over 700,000 stations, accounting for around 70% of the global total. And with such achievements and through ever-increasing support from both the government and society, experts expect Chinese researchers to make even greater breakthroughs in the future.